Hello. Okay, so we're continuing on with this, moving into memory more deeply here. So, okay, it's kind of weird to think about, ask yourself, what is memory? And we might say, it's what I remember. It's the ability to remember things. So this might be kind of an odd definition for memory, but in terms of these whole neural net profiles and the way neurons fire and wire together and coming to understand that, it's also kind of an interesting definition. If we think of memory as the way past events are encoded and alter future responses. So let's kind of dig a little more deeply into that. So memory includes encoding, storage, and retrieval of information. So an example, again, back to imagine a trip to Paris, you see the Eiffel Tower. Wouldn't that be fun? So on a trip to Paris, you see the Eiffel Tower. So that's going to be sort of and you know, if you don't like that one, come up with anything, any city you've been to and something you've seen you can do. It can be the Empire State Building in New York, anywhere. It can be the scary Bronco at the airport in Denver. So anything. But here's the different steps and parts of it. So first of all, an engram, which might be a new word, but an engram is the initial impact of an experience on the brain. So it includes various aspects of the experience. So if you are thinking of the Eiffel Tower, or you see the Eiffel Tower on a trip to Paris, the engram is going to be that initial impact on the brain, the initial firing and wiring, and it can include many things. The factual, like in terms of the actual words you would use to describe it, about the facts of it. It may also be that maybe you're talking to a friend about philosophy or about the history of the Eiffel Tower, and so it might be the facts about that, the sequencing of events that you were talking about. Autobiographical is a sense of yourself in the situation, how you were feeling, like just who you were, how you were feeling about yourself, who you were at that time. Somatic, what your body felt like, if you had a stomach ache, or if you felt really good, or you were tired, or, any of that. Perceptual, so that can be all your sensory sort of input and information, what it smelled like, if there was like a street vendor in terms of food and that information. Emotional, if you were excited, or if you were sad, or if something had just happened, but your emotional content. Behavioral, what you were doing, if you were walking, if you were carrying a cup, drinking a cup of coffee, whatever it is. So all of this, we have to think about that. All of that input from the body, the emotions, the inner experience, and the outer experience, all of that together is the engram, the initial. And all of that is being fired and wired in the brain in different areas in different ways, but it's all also being connected together within that moment. Okay? And so every sort of engram has a gist to it. Kind of like, well, I was in Paris when I was 25 and I saw the Eiffel Tower. Kind of the gist of it, the whole overlay there. And it has specific details. I was walking down the street with a friend and we were talking about the history of the Eiffel Tower and who built it. And I was drinking coffee and there was a dog that barked and there was this street vendor selling food and blah, 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 blah. All the very specific. So it has both of these, that overall sort of essence of the moment and then the specific details. And what's interesting about that is, well, we'll talk about that later, but a gist is easier to recall than details. Okay, so you have this engram, this initial impact on the brain. Encoding neurons, so say neurons in your visual system are activated, as are all the others. The activated circuitry creates a visual representation or image of the tower in your mind, the Eiffel Tower in your mind, or that Bronco, or whatever it is. This is called encoding the memory. You get a representation of it in your mind. So whatever that is, it can be, that's how we encode the memory, is this initial representation of the moment, or the visual system gets a visual representation. The sound will get an auditory representation. All the different areas will get a representation that they hold and that they encode within that moment. Now, storage is an interesting one, because we might wonder, how are memories stored? There is no filing cabinet in your brain. There's no like cabinet where you can pull out trip to Paris and I saw the, blah, 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 and it has all these details and facts on it and I can just read them all. It doesn't happen that way. Storage is actually all it is, and this is a little weird way of understanding it, but it's only an increased probability that a similar, though not exact, neural net profile will be activated in the future. So you're actually storing a probability. You're storing a memory trace. You're storing a pattern of this neural net profiles in your brain. And the more you recall it, the stronger it will become. But storage is simply that. It's a storing of a probability of all of these neurons firing again together at a later time when we get to retrieval, which we come to next. I'm going to hide myself because I seem to be in the way. So, retrieval, activation in the future of a neural circuit similar to the potentiated or remembered neural circuit. So, we're just trying to retrieve that original activation. When you consciously try to visualize the Eiffel Tower, so later you're trying to visualize it. What do I remember? The parts of your brain involved in visually processing it fire in a similar neural net profile as when you originally saw it. So the brain can generate a circuitry of firing when you see with your eyes, as well as when you recreate it in your imagination. So sometimes I'll say the brain doesn't know the difference between actually experiencing something and imagining something. So this can, if you think about your stress patterns or things like that, that can go into this too. We can bring things to mind, and the brain, whatever kind of neural net profiles it has for that, it can activate something similar. And we'll talk about why it's not exact, because memory is not an exact art. Absolutely, it is a reconstructed art. So these representations come in many forms. Each person's memory of the same site will be different due to different associations in their networks. And I really talked about that before during encoding. But remember, you have perceptual, semantic, sensory, emotional, behavioral. You also have current and in-between perceptions and memories. So if since your trip, you've learned other things about the Eiffel Tower, you've seen it in the news, or a friend told you something that happened to them, and then like how you feel about the friend maybe you were with then, maybe you guys got in a fight and you're no longer friends, all of those memories and all of that stuff is going to now also, when you try to retrieve it, get into the mix as well and start firing along with that. So you're bringing back kind of the gist and some of those specifics, a similar pattern, but now it also has additional stuff with it too. Remembering is not the reactivation of an old engram, but the calling up of a gist and then reconstructing the details. Reconstruction is the creation of a new neural net profile that now includes elements of the original engram and elements of other memories and current perceptions and state of mind. I hope that makes sense. I really do. I want you to understand that it's like memory is just reconstructed. But we do have this memory trace, it could be called, this engram, this encoded information that we have stored the probability that these things will fire and wire together again when we try to recall them. And the more we recall them over time, the stronger they get, but they are going to also now include other elements of other memories and people and information in our current state. So they're never going to be perfect, and they're never going to be just right, and they're never going to be just like anybody else's, because everything else got wired in there with it, that you and your sensory perceptions and your internal conditions brought to bear on the situation. Okay. I'm really hoping all that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to actually stop there again, believe it or not, because the next one is going to be about different types of memory that we have, but try to make this a little bit shorter pieces for you.